We cannot train all of you.
You are the eldest. You will help the family. I will still go later, right?
The day Chika's childhood died did not come with thunder or warning. It came quietly, in the middle of a family meeting where her fate was decided as if she were nothing more than a burden to be rearranged. Her father, Okeke, cleared his throat and avoided her eyes, his voice heavy but firm. "We cannot train all of you." The words hung in the air like smoke, choking and final. Her mother, Nwakaego, did not hesitate. She folded her arms and added coldly, "You are the eldest. You will help the family." Chika blinked, her fingers tightening around the edge of her wrapper, her heart beginning to pound in confusion. She forced a small, hopeful smile, the kind that begged for mercy. "I will still go later, right?" Silence. Thick, unforgiving silence. Her parents said nothing. They did not even look at her. And in that moment, it hit her like a slap across the face. She was not going back to school. The little dream she had been nurturing, writing her name proudly in the sand, imagining herself in a classroom, vanished just like that. Her chest tightened, her throat burned, but she swallowed it all, because in that house, tears were a luxury she could not afford. The next morning, she stood by the door as her younger siblings, Adaeze, Obiageli, and little Chibuzo, stepped out in their neat school uniforms, laughing, pushing each other playfully, complaining about homework they did not even value. Chika watched them go, her eyes following them until they disappeared down the dusty path, her vision blurring as tears finally escaped. She quickly wiped them away before anyone could see. There was no time to cry. There was work to do. By noon, the sun was merciless, burning down on her as she moved from street to street, a tray of goods balanced on her head, her feet aching, her stomach empty, her voice growing weaker with every call to customers who barely noticed her. By evening, her body was heavy with exhaustion, her legs trembling as she dragged herself back home, hoping, just hoping, that someone would notice her effort. But the moment she stepped into the compound, her mother's sharp voice cut through the air. "How much did you make?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "Have you eaten?" Just money. Chika lowered her gaze and stretched out the small amount she had managed to earn. It was not enough. It was never enough. Her father snatched the money, counted it, and his face darkened with anger. "Is this what you call work?" He barked, his voice rising dangerously. Before she could speak, before she could explain, his hand came down hard on her back. "Are you trying to kill this family?" he shouted as he beat her mercilessly. Chika cried out, her body recoiling from each blow, but no one came to her defense. Her mother stood there, watching as if it was normal, as if it was deserved. And somewhere in the middle of the pain, something inside Chika began to break. Not just her body, but her spirit, her innocence, her belief that she was loved. Dear viewer, before we continue, kindly support this channel by subscribing. It means a lot and helps stories like this reach more people. Tell me, how could parents turn their first child into the breadwinner of the family? Why do some parents refuse to let their children truly be children? And if you were Chika, would you have stayed and endured this suffering, or would you have walked away? Kindly share your thoughts in the comment section. Now, come with me as I take you through this heartbreaking story, a story filled with pain, resilience, and powerful moral lessons. In a small, struggling household where survival was a daily battle, lived a family whose story was written in hardship and quiet injustice. The father, Okeke, was a loud man with a heavy voice and an even heavier love for drink. A man who preferred the comfort of cheap liquor to the responsibility of providing for his home. The mother, Nwakaego, was sharp-tongued and cunning, her words often cutting deeper than any physical blow, her mind always calculating who should carry the burden of the family's poverty. And that burden, from a very young age, fell squarely on the shoulders of their first daughter, Chika. Chika was calm, soft-spoken, and strikingly beautiful, the kind of beauty that turned heads even in worn-out clothes. But what stood out even more was her hard-working spirit, a spirit forced to grow too quickly. Beneath her were her siblings, each living a completely different reality. Adaize, the first younger sister, was proud and spoiled, always quick to remind Chika of her place. Obiejeli, the second, followed closely behind, her sarcasm sharp and often directed at the very sister who sacrificed everything for her. Then there was Chibuzo, the last-born, pampered beyond measure, disrespectful in ways that only a child raised without discipline could be. Their home reflected their situation. Empty pots lined the kitchen like silent witnesses to hunger. Torn clothes hung loosely on their bodies, and outside, neighbors whispered endlessly, their gossip floating through the air like smoke that never cleared. That first daughter, one would say, she's the one feeding all of them. And it was true. From as early as 8 years old, Chika's life had already become a cycle of labor and responsibility. While other children learned how to read and play, she learned how to cook for a family, standing on tiptoes to stir pots too big for her small frame. She carried water in containers nearly the size of her body, her thin arms trembling under the weight, yet she never complained. Meanwhile, her siblings filled the compound with laughter, playing 10-10, clapping their hands and singing carelessly, their voices rising into the air as if life had handed them a completely different script. One afternoon, in a moment that would have been funny if it wasn't so painfully telling, Chibuzo sat stubbornly on the floor, refusing to drink water. "I will not drink," he declared, folding his arms with childish authority, "unless Chika sings for me." Chika, already exhausted from chores, paused and looked at him in disbelief. But before she could respond, their mother's voice cut in sharply. "Chika, sing for your brother," Nwakaigo said without hesitation. "He is a boy, don't stress him." And so, with a tired smile that hid her frustration, Chika began to sing softly, her voice gentle and soothing, just to make her younger brother drink water, while the others laughed. It was in moments like that the injustice showed itself clearly, but no one called it by its name. The first real crack in Chika's heart came each morning when she stood by the roadside, watching children her age walk past in neat school uniforms, their books held tightly, their laughter free and unburdened. She would stare at them until they disappeared, her chest tightening with a longing she could not express. Then, one day, something unexpected happened. Chika got admission into school. For the first time in her life, hope bloomed inside her like a fragile flower. She practiced writing her name in the sand over and over again, Chika, tracing each letter carefully, smiling to herself as if she had already stepped into a new life. But hope in that house was never allowed to grow for long. That evening, a family meeting was called. Okeke sat with a serious expression, clearing his throat as though preparing to deliver something important. "We cannot train all of you," he said finally, his voice flat, final. Nwakaego did not even try to soften it. "You are the eldest. You will help the family." Chika felt her heart skip. Confusion washing over her, she forced a small, hopeful smile. "I will still go later, right?" she asked quietly, her voice almost pleading. Silence. No answer. No reassurance. Just silence that stretched endlessly, heavy and suffocating. And in that silence, reality settled in. She was not going back to school. The dream she had barely begun to touch slipped through her fingers like sand. The next morning, she stood at the doorway, her body still, her heart heavy, as Adaize, Obiageli, and Chibuzo stepped out in their clean uniforms, laughing and arguing playfully. They did not look back. They did not notice the tears gathering in her eyes. Chika watched them until they disappeared, her vision blurring as the weight of her new life pressed down on her. And just like that, her childhood ended, not with noise, but with silence. From the moment Chika's dreams were taken from her, her life quietly transformed into something far heavier than she was ever meant to carry. She became the backbone of a family that never once asked if she was strong enough. Every morning, before the sun fully rose, she was already on her feet, tying her wrapper tightly, balancing a tray of fruits on her head, stepping into the harsh heat of the day. The sun showed her no mercy. It burned her skin, drained her strength, yet she moved from street to street, calling out to strangers who barely looked at her. When the fruits did not sell, she did not rest. She went into the bush to gather firewood, lifting bundles almost bigger than her small frame, her legs shaking under the weight as she dragged them home. On other days, she washed piles of clothes for people who never learned her name, her fingers wrinkled and sore from hours in soapy water, her back bent in exhaustion. And when there was pepper to grind, she knelt for hours, crushing it over and over until her hands swelled and burned, the sharp sting mixing with silent tears she refused to let fall. One afternoon, under the unforgiving sun, her body finally gave in. Her vision blurred, her steps slowed, and before she could steady herself, she collapsed, the tray of fruit scattering across the dusty ground. People gathered, murmuring. Some pitied her, others simply stepped around her, life moving on as if she was nothing. When she finally regained consciousness, there was no time to rest, no one to comfort her. She gathered what she could and dragged herself back home, her body heavy, her stomach painfully empty. As she stepped into the compound, hoping for even the smallest sign of concern, her mother's voice cut through the air sharply. "How much did you make? Not, are you okay? Not, why are you looking like this? Just money." Chika slowly stretched out the little she had earned, her hands trembling. It was not enough. It was never enough. Her father, Okeke, snatched the money, counted it, and his face hardened instantly. "Is this what you call work?" he barked, his voice rising with anger. Chika opened her mouth to explain, her voice barely above a whisper. "Papa, I fell." But she did not finish the sentence. His hand came down on her back with force. "Are you trying to kill this family?" he shouted, striking her again and again as she cried out in pain, her body folding under the blows. Her mother stood by, watching without a word, as if it was normal, as if this was the price Chika had to pay for not bringing home enough. That was her life, day after day, work, pain, silence. In the evenings, after all the labor, she still returned to the kitchen, cooking for everyone, stirring pots with tired arms, serving food carefully, making sure each plate was full. Then she would sit quietly, waiting for her turn, waiting for what was left. One evening, after serving everyone, she looked into the pot and found nothing, not even a spoonful. Her heart sank, but she forced a small smile and turned to her mother. "Mama, my own," she asked gently. Onwakaigo did not even look at her. "Next time, sell more," she replied coldly. The words landed harder than any slap. Chika nodded slowly, swallowing the lump in her throat as she stepped back. In the corner, Chibuzo sat happily, licking his plate with exaggerated enjoyment, making loud, mocking sounds. This food's sweet, oh," he said, glancing at her with a grin that carried no innocence. The others laughed. Chika smiled too, a quiet, practiced smile. But as she turned away, tears slipped down her face, silent and not unnoticed, just like her suffering. Time moved quietly, but it did not move gently on Chika. It shaped her, stretched her, and somehow, in the middle of hardship, it turned her into a young woman whose beauty could not be hidden, not even by suffering. Her skin glowed like the morning sun after rain, her eyes soft, yet deep with stories no one had cared to hear, and her calm presence carried a quiet dignity that made people pause when she passed. The villagers began to talk, their voices filled with awe and disbelief. If beauty were money, "This girl would be rich," one woman whispered as Chika walked by with her tray balanced on her head. "Such a face, yet such a life," another would add, shaking her head. But beauty did not change her reality. Her clothes were still worn and faded, her slippers barely holding together, and every single day she was still out under the sun, hawking, calling out to customers, her voice steady despite the weight of her life. Men began to notice her, young men, older men, even those who had no business looking twice. But Chika paid them no attention, her mind too occupied with survival to entertain dreams. Then one day, at the market, something different happened. A young man approached her stall, his presence calm yet noticeable, his clothes clean, his posture confident but not arrogant. His name was Obina. He was wealthy, but there was a softness about him, a kindness that did not need to announce itself. He picked up some fruits, examining them carefully, though it was clear he did not truly need them. "How much?" he asked, his voice gentle. Chika told him the price, avoiding his eyes as she always did with customers, but he did not leave immediately. He lingered, watching her as she attended to others, observing the way she spoke politely, the way she handled even rude customers with quiet patience. There was something about her that pulled him in, something deeper than beauty, something real. The next day, he returned, and the day after that, and soon it became a pattern. He would come, buy things he did not need, sometimes even paying more than necessary. "You don't have to do that," Chika said one afternoon, finally looking at him with a hint of curiosity. Obina smiled lightly. "Maybe I want to," he replied. He tried to talk to her, asking simple questions, but Chika remained guarded, her responses short, her walls high, built from years of disappointment. Still, he did not give up. One evening, as the sun began to set and the market quieted, he stood beside her and spoke words that made her pause. "You deserve better than this life," he said softly, his eyes searching hers. For a moment, Chika said nothing, her grip tightening on the edge of her tray, her heart stirring in a way she was not used to. Then she smiled, a small, sad smile that carried years of acceptance. "This life is mine," she replied quietly. And in that moment, Obina realized that the strongest thing about Chika was not her beauty, but the way she had learned to live with a life she never chose. The day Obina came with his family was the kind of day that should have changed Chika's life forever. But instead, it became the day her heart was quietly destroyed. The compound was unusually lively. Mwakaego moved around with forced excitement, arranging things as though she had always been a proud, caring mother, while Okeke suddenly carried himself like a responsible man, clearing his throat and giving unnecessary instructions. When Obina and his family arrived, they were welcomed with wide smiles and exaggerated hospitality. "You are welcome, Ezigbo people," Nwakaego said warmly, her voice coated with sweetness she had never once shown Chika. Chika stood quietly at the back, her heart pounding, her hands trembling slightly as she stole glances at Obina, who looked calm but expectant, his eyes searching for hers in the crowd. Everything seemed to be going well. Laughter filled the air, drinks were served, and for the first time it felt like maybe, just maybe, something good was finally happening for her. But behind that smiling gathering, something dark was already unfolding. Later that evening, Nwakaego called Obina aside for a private conversation, her tone shifting the moment they were alone. "My son," she began softly, "you seem like a good man, and that is why I must tell you the truth." Obina listened, confused but respectful. "Chika is not the right one for you," she said, her voice dropping into a whisper of false concern. Obina frowned slightly. "I don't understand, Mama." Nwakaego sighed dramatically. "That girl, she is stubborn, very stubborn. She does not listen. And," she hesitated, lowering her voice further, "there are things we have noticed. She may not be able to bear children." The words landed heavily, poisoning the air between them. Obina's expression changed, doubt creeping into his mind. "But she doesn't seem that way," he said slowly, uncertainty in his voice. Nwakaigo quickly pressed on. You cannot see everything from outside, my son. We are her parents. We know her well. But Adaeze, she smiled faintly. Adaeze is different. She is well-behaved, respectful, and strong. She will give you peace. Confusion battled with trust in Obina's mind, his thoughts clouded by the authority of a mother's words. And slowly, without realizing it, he was being pulled away from the truth. Days passed, and before Chika could even understand what was happening, everything changed. The discussions shifted, the focus moved, and suddenly it was Adaeze whose name was being mentioned, Adaeze whose future was being planned. Then came the wedding day. The compound was filled with music, laughter, and celebration. But for Chika, it felt like a cruel performance she had been forced to watch from the shadows. She was in the kitchen from morning till night, cooking, sweating, serving, doing everything to ensure the wedding went smoothly. Her wedding? No, not hers anymore. Adaeze walked around proudly in fine clothes, smiling brightly, basking in a joy that did not belong to her, while Chika moved silently in the background, invisible, her hands working, her heart breaking. At some point, she carried a tray of food out to the guests, her steps steady despite the storm inside her. She moved from one person to another, serving with a polite smile, her voice calm as she said, "Please eat," as though nothing was wrong. As she turned, her eyes met Obina's. Time seemed to stop. He looked at her, really looked at her, and in his eyes there was something she had never seen before: regret. A quiet, painful regret that said he was beginning to understand what had been taken from him and from her. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Chika felt her chest tighten, her breath catching, but she did not break, not there, not in front of everyone. Instead, she smiled, a soft, controlled smile, the kind that hid everything she was feeling. Then she looked away and continued serving, as if nothing had happened. But deep inside, something shattered completely. Not loudly, not visibly, but in a way that would never be whole again. Life did not pause to acknowledge Chika's pain. It moved on as if nothing had happened, as if her heart had not been broken in front of her own eyes, as if her dreams had not been handed over to someone else without her consent. The morning after the wedding, the compound returned to its usual rhythm. Pots clanged, voices rose, and responsibilities waited for no one. Chika woke up before everyone, just like always, her body aching, her heart heavy, but her hands already reaching for the day's work. It was as though the world had silently agreed that her suffering did not deserve attention. One afternoon, as she worked tirelessly in the kitchen, her mother, Nwakaigo, walked in, watching her for a moment before speaking in that same cold, dismissive tone. "Stop looking like someone who has lost everything," she said sharply. "Your time will come after your siblings." Chika paused briefly, her back still turned, her hands resting on the pot, but she said nothing. What was left to say? Her time, a promise that had already proven itself empty. Outside, the voices of her siblings filled the air, louder now, bolder, heavier with entitlement. Adaeze, now married and visiting, spoke carelessly as she adjusted her wrapper. "You are just a house girl," she said with a slight laugh, not even bothering to lower her voice. Ogbiajeli joined in, rolling her eyes. "At least house girls get paid. What do you even get?" They laughed, a careless, mocking sound that cut deeper than any insult. Even Chibuzo, now older but no wiser, added with a smirk, "If not for us, what would you even be doing?" Chika stood there, silent, absorbing every word, her face calm, her heart quietly enduring. And still, she continued to train them, to support them, to sacrifice for them, as though love could somehow grow where respect did not exist. Time passed in a blur, days folding into months, months into years, and life unfolded like a montage of achievements that did not belong to her. She watched as her siblings graduated one after the other, their success celebrated loudly, proudly, as though it had come easily.
She was there behind the scenes, the invisible force that had made it all possible, yet no one spoke her name. They moved on to better lives, good jobs, comfortable homes, wearing fine clothes and speaking with confidence, becoming people others admired. But when it came to Chika, there was nothing. No gratitude, no support, no acknowledgement. She remained in the same house, older now, her youthful glow dimmed by years of struggle, her hands rough, her spirit worn. Suitors who once glanced her way had long stopped coming. Whispers began to replace admiration. Is she still not married? Something must be wrong. And still the demands never ended. Her parents continued to stretch out their hands, expecting, taking, never giving. Chika, we need money, her father would say, as though it was her duty, as though it had always been her role. And Chika would give, because she knew nothing else, because somewhere deep inside, she still carried the weight of a responsibility that was never meant to be hers. Life moved on, but for Chika, it felt like she had been left behind, stuck in a place where sacrifice had no reward and love had no return.
The morning was unusually quiet, the kind of silence that comes before something irreversible. And in the middle of that stillness stood Chika, her small bag resting beside her, her eyes no longer swollen with fresh tears, but heavy with years of pain finally reaching their limit. She looked at her parents, really looked at them, as though seeing them clearly for the first time, not as figures to obey, but as the people who had taken everything from her. Her voice trembled at first, but she did not hold back. "Do you even know what you have done to me?" she began, her words sharp with emotion. Okeke shifted slightly, but said nothing, while Nua Kaego folded her arms, her face unreadable. Chika stepped forward, her hands shaking as she pointed toward the house. "I cooked in that kitchen when I was still a child. I carried loads my body could not handle. I fed this family when I had nothing to eat." Her voice rose, breaking under the weight of truth she had buried for years. "I watched my mates go to school while I stood outside like a stranger in my own life." Her chest heaved, her breath unsteady as tears filled her eyes, but she did not stop. "I gave up everything, everything, and what did I get in return?" Silence. No answer. Not even a single word of regret. Her voice dropped, softer now, but more painful. "You turned me into a mother when I was a child," she said, the sentence hanging heavily in the air. Still, nothing. They stood there, looking at her, but saying absolutely nothing. No apology, no remorse, just silence that confirmed everything she had finally come to understand. Chika nodded slowly, a bitter, broken smile forming on her lips. "It's okay," she whispered, more to herself than to them. She bent down, picked up her bag, and without another word, she turned and walked away. No one called her back. No one tried to stop her. No footsteps followed her behind. It was as if she had never truly belonged there in the first place. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in her life, it was hers. In a new town, far from the place that had held her captive for so long, Chika started again. The beginning was not easy. She struggled, taking small jobs, learning to survive all over again. But this time, every effort was for herself. Every step forward belonged to her alone. There were days she felt weak, days the past tried to pull her back, but she kept going because there was nothing left for her behind. Then one day, in the middle of her quiet, determined life, she met Emeka. He was different from anyone she had ever known, the son of a powerful man, yet without arrogance, without pride. There was a calmness about him, a kindness that did not need to be spoken loudly. He noticed her, not just her beauty, but the strength in her silence, the depth in her eyes, the story she carried without words. One evening, as they spoke, he looked at her thoughtfully and said gently, "You have been through a lot. I can see it." Chika looked away,
a faint smile touching her lips, unsure how to respond. But Emeka did not push. He simply stayed, patient, respectful, present. And for the first time in a long while, someone was not trying to use her, but to understand her.
Emeka did not come into Chika's life with empty promises. He came with quiet actions that slowly began to rebuild everything she had lost. He saw beyond her silence, beyond the strength she wore like armor, and he made a decision that would change her life in ways she had never imagined. One evening, as they sat under the fading light, he looked at her gently and said, "Chika, you deserve a chance to become everything you were meant to be." She frowned slightly, unsure of where he was going. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Emeka smiled. "You are going back to school." The words stunned her. For a moment, she just stared at him, her heart racing, her mind struggling to process what she had just heard. "School?" she repeated, almost as if the word no longer belonged to her world. He nodded. "Yes, it is not too late." Her eyes filled with tears she could not hold back, not tears of pain this time, but something unfamiliar, something warm. No one had ever said those words to her before. No one had ever believed she deserved more. True to his word, Emeka made it happen. He enrolled her, supported her, encouraged her, and for the first time, Chika sat in a classroom not as a dreamer outside the window, but as a student with a future. It was not easy at first. The years she had lost weighed heavily on her, but she pushed through, determined, focused, hungry for the knowledge she had been denied. But Emeka did not stop there. "You also need something of your own," he told her one day, "something that belongs to you." And he helped her start a business, guiding her, supporting her, standing by her side as she built something from nothing. It was the first time in her life that someone invested in her, not used her, not drained her, but poured into her, believed in her, lifted her. And slowly, beautifully, Chika began to blossom. The tired girl who once walked with her head down was gone, replaced by a confident woman who stood tall, spoke with purpose, and carried herself with quiet pride. As her life began to take shape, so did her relationship with Emeka. It grew naturally, gently, without pressure. He never forced his way into her space, never demanded more than she was ready to give. He respected her boundaries, listened when she spoke, and even when she was silent, he understood. And Chika, for the first time, began to let her guard down, little by little, learning to trust again, learning that love did not always come with pain. One evening, as they sat together in comfortable silence, Emeka turned to her, his expression serious but filled with warmth. "Chika, I want to marry you." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning, yet gentle in the way he spoke them. Chika's heart skipped, emotions rushing through her, fear, hope, disbelief. She looked at him, really looked at him, and for a moment she allowed herself to imagine a life she had once thought was impossible. But then she took a deep breath, her voice calm but firm. "You must meet my parents." Emeka paused, slightly surprised, but he nodded without hesitation. "If that is what you want, I will," he replied. And in that moment, Chika knew that this was not just about love. It was about facing her past, standing tall before it, and finally reclaiming the life that had once been taken from her. When Chika and Emeka finally returned, the journey back was heavy, not because of distance, but because of the memories waiting at the end of it. As they stepped into the compound she once called home, everything felt smaller, quieter, almost forgotten. The house that once echoed with demands and harsh voices now stood tired and neglected, its walls worn, its surroundings empty. And then she saw them. Okeke and Owakego, no longer the commanding figures she had feared, but shadows of themselves, weak, unkempt, and broken by time. Poverty clung to them, loneliness sat heavily in their eyes, and the absence of the children they had once favored was painfully obvious. Chika's gaze searched the compound instinctively. "Where are they?" she asked softly. Nwakego's lips trembled, her voice barely holding together. They left," she said. "Everyone is living their own life."
The words hung in the air, heavy with regret. In that moment, the truth landed like a thunderbolt. The very children she had sacrificed everything for were nowhere to be found, and the parents who had taken everything from her were now abandoned, left to face the consequences of their choices. Silence fell, deep and uncomfortable, until suddenly Nwakego dropped to her knees. "Chika!" she cried, her voice breaking as tears streamed down her face. Okeke followed, his pride long gone, his voice shaking. "Forgive us, please forgive us." They moved closer, their bodies trembling as they reached for her, desperation in every movement. Nwakego rolled on the ground, crying uncontrollably. "We have suffered, we have seen our mistakes," she wailed. "Don't leave us like this." Chika stood still, her heart pounding, emotions clashing within her. Pain, anger, pity, memories rushing back all at once. For a long moment, she said nothing, just looking at them, seeing not just who they were now, but everything they had been to her. Then she took a slow breath, her voice calm, steady, but firm. "I forgive you," she said. The words brought a flicker of hope to their tear-filled eyes, but before it could grow, she continued, "But you will never come into my home." The sentence fell like a boundary carved in stone. "I will help you, but from a distance," she added quietly. "What you did to me, I will never forget." Her parents broke down even more, nodding through their tears, knowing they had no right to ask for anything more.
Time passed and life moved forward, but this time it moved differently for Chika. She married Emeka in a ceremony filled with genuine joy, not forced smiles or hidden pain. And soon her home was filled with laughter, the kind she had once only watched from afar. She had children, beautiful, lively children who ran freely, their faces bright with happiness. They ate together, sat together, shared moments filled with love and warmth, moments Chika made sure they would never take for granted. Sometimes she would sit quietly and watch them, a soft smile on her lips, her eyes reflecting both the past and the present. And in those moments, the truth of her journey became clear. She was denied a childhood, but she gave one to her children. This story teaches us that not every sacrifice is love, and not every family deserves unlimited access to your life. No child should be forced to carry the weight of adulthood while their dreams are buried. Parents are meant to guide, not exploit. Chika's journey reminds us that it is never too late to rebuild your life, and walking away from pain is not wickedness, it is wisdom. Forgiveness is powerful, but it does not mean forgetting or allowing people to hurt you again. In the end, know your worth, protect your peace, and never allow anyone take from you what they are not willing to give back.